Okay.
Okay.
Let's go.
All right.
Page 527. Tracy used to come. Now you have to replace Tracy.
That's right. We just talked to her today.
How's she doing?
Okay. Very
Baruch
well.
Hashem. 527. The name of the parsha is Vayechi. Vayechi meant, and he left. He lived, right? And Jacob lived. Speaking about the life of Jacob. And the same question, hello, the same question, the same question that we asked in Parshas Chayesoro, the life of Sarah, and it actually speaks about the death of Sarah. Here he called the name of the parsha Vayechi, the life of Jacob, and it's about the death of Jacob. Then we'll answer the same answer that you answered then. The answer is life is not measured by how many miles you're running every day. That's nice. But life is measured by afterlife. If your legacy continues, that means your life continues. Means your life was worthwhile. When was the life of Sarah measured? When Sarah died, and Isaac married Rebekah, and it was a new generation. Then we knew that Abraham's life was not wasted. It was worthwhile. It made an impact. It was for good, so to speak. The same thing here. When is Vayechi? When is Jacob alive? When after he dies, and there is children and grandchildren, and the generations continue, then we know that Jacob is alive. That's the name of the parsha. Now we'll start to read a little bit, and then we'll get into it. Go ahead, if you don't mind.
Yaakov lived in the land of Egypt 17 years. The days of Yaakov, the years of his life, were 147 years.
Yaakov lived 17 years. 17 in Hebrew has a special gematria, has a special acronym for letters. The word Tov. Tov means?
Good.
Good. Tet is how much?
10.
Tet, the letter Tet. Yud is 10.
Oh.
Then how much is Tet? 9. Vav is 6. Is at what? 15. Bet is 2. 17. The best years of Jacob's life were in Egypt. Isn't this strange? He finally had his family around him. He had his children, Joseph, the grandchildren. He was so happy. But not only here. Where Jacob flourished. Jacob flourished always in exile, in diaspora. In Israel, he only had Tzoras. Where he flourished? In Haran, he went to Haran to marry Rachel, right? To marry his wife. He ended up to marry 4 wives, 12 children, became a very rich man. 22 years in Haran were unbelievable for Jacob, very productive years. Then he came to Israel. What he had in Israel? Rachel died. Dinah was raped. Joseph was sold. Every tzorah after the other, not having one happy day. Then Jacob's life, strangely enough, were successful only outside of Israel. Before he went to Haran, it was a strife with Esau. He stole the blessings. Obviously, it was before that problems between him and Esau. Wasn't an exciting thing. Isn't it strange that his best years of his life were not in Israel? What is this telling us? Vayechi, where he lived? In Egypt. And Egypt was considered the lowest place. It was the Las Vegas of the world, the idol worshipping. It was, the most advanced place, but on the other hand, the most unmoral place around. And there he lived. Maybe it's a lesson to us. Then God wants us to go out. God wants us to bring life, to bring spirituality to other places. Living in Israel is very nice for ourselves. It's a very good spiritual experience. But we cannot afford this spiritual luxury when we need to share the belief of God with other people.
We did that. When I was in the Army, I brought Sharon down, and we lived in Fort Knox, Kentucky, amongst all the Goyim and the hillbillies and everything else. And the funniest story, I went to work every day doing what I did, and she would talk with the neighbors and the women.
Mm-hmm.
And what did they do?
One of the women came up and she started touching my head,
Mm-hmm.
like feeling my
To
head.
see if you have...
And she said to me, "How do you keep your tail?" And I said to her, "What are you talking about?" And
But
We
she,
were
and she
bring-
kept, she literally went through my whole head.
then this is really the job. Our job...
This was a poor girl from Cleveland Heights that didn't understand.
And this is really our job. Our job in life is to go out and to share our spirituality with the rest of the world. That's why we are exiled. We are not exiled because it's exile. Anything that God is doing is not only doing for the bad. God is doing something. He has a purpose. And the purpose is we were chased out of the land of Israel, and we were going from place to place all over the world to bring the belief of God everywhere else in the world. That's our mission. We are on a mission. We are the mezuzah of the world. We are the rabbis of the world. What's a mezuzah? The job of the mezuzah is to remind us about God. Our job is to remind the world about God. Not going around and screaming and preaching, but by our own behavior, by our own moral behavior, we keep the moral level of society at a higher level.
Yeah, we're really the Jehovah's Witnesses.
Yeah, exactly. It should be, but not the way knocking on doors, but we do it in a
Yeah.
more professional way.
Mm-hmm.
That's why we are outside of Israel. There is a reason why we are outside of Israel. That's why we are all over the world, constantly going to different exile, different places. It's all for one purpose, to bring godliness around. And that's the first lesson we learn from the first thing about this parsha, that Jacob lived outside of Israel. Now we'll continue with number 29.
The days of Yisrael's death drew near, and he called for his son Yosef and said to him, "I have found favor in your eyes. Please place your hand under my thigh, that you will deal kindly and truthfully with me. Please do not bury me in Egypt."
He calls them and he tells them, please. He asks him a very important question. He doesn't want to be buried in Egypt. Why Jacob didn't want to be buried in Egypt? What's the reason? What do you think?
He wants to be buried with his ancestors.
He wants to be buried with his
Cave of
ancestors
Machpelah.
in Cave of Machpelah. That's what he actually says in the text. In the next line, he says it clear, right? He says he wants to be buried with his forefathers. Rashi brings other reasons. Number one, he says a few reasons, but one of the reasons that Rashi brings is that he was afraid that the Egyptian will make from him an idol. Why? Because the bodies of tzaddikim do not decay. Sounds strange, right?
Hmm.
Holy bodies do not decay. They remain intact. There is stories about people who their graves were digged up, tzaddikim, for different reasons, and they found their bodies intact. There is one story that's, not from long ago, I would say maybe 100 years ago, less. It was the fifth Chabad Rebbe. He was buried in a city in Russia, it's called Rostov, and he died in 1920. 10 years later, the Russians decided, the communists decided to destroy the cemetery. There was no problem. Cemeteries, there was no sentiments. Whatever is needed for the people, right? Everything is for the people. Then, in the name of then Hasidim who heard it, decided to move the Rebbe to a different cemetery. His son, who was then the Rebbe, was already not in Russia. He was in Poland. Then the Rebbe's father, who was also a very great rabbi, he gave the directions how to do it and what to do. Then somebody wrote, 10 Hasidim moved his gravesite from one place to another. They did it at night in the dark because it was against the law. Nobody was allowed to know about it. It was in the darkest times of communism. And they fasted all day, and they had all directions exactly how to do it. They digged up the whole thing. It was full of mud. It was a terrible winter night. And they took out, you have to take out a certain amount of dirt around and to move it with the dirt. In any case, they opened the box, or they opened, or was open, or they had to open, whatever the reason is. And he writes that the whole body was intact completely, like it was put in. Just in the one of the legs were a little not straight, they straightened it out. That's the only thing that was done. 10 years later, the paper is written. The letter that this Chassid sent to the previous Rebbe to report him what happened, this letter, the handwriting, is there. And there is stories about a famous Hasidic rabbi, Rabbi Zushe of Anipoli, who lived 200 years ago, died over 200 years ago, and is buried in Poland. When the Nazis came, the local goyim told them that there in the cemetery must be a big treasure. Why there is a lot of money there? Because the Jews go there to find, they constantly go there. They go there to protect the treasure that they have. That the Nazis ordered the Jews to dig up the grave. They digged up the grave, they found somebody laying there, intact. Then, this is a story that I heard, but the story of the fifth Chabad Rebbe, that's a story that I read a letter, what he writes to the Rebbe. Then tzaddikim, why is it? Because a tzaddik, a righteous man, he serves God with his body so strong, his body is so elevated, and every bone in his body is utilized to the right thing, that it's being embodied with spirituality that lives on forever. Like the soul lives on forever, so the body lives on forever. Because the body becomes a part of God Himself, just like the soul. I don't know what's the new here. Huh? Just close it here too, because the water.
This over here, Rashi.
Yeah, I'm reading. I know
No,
it.
this is all
I read
commentary.
it.
It's all commentary, and this is the Torah.
Okay.
They're calling to see if class is on.
I know who it is, but you'll have to wait. Just to close this stupid thing and finished. That's it. Then here he says, that's what Jacob was afraid. Jacob was afraid they'll make him into a god. That's one of the reasons that he's asking to be buried. You see, Jacob came to Egypt in a temporary thing. It was not his place. He felt he has to go back home. Where is his home? Home is Israel. Then that's what he says in number 30.
But rather, let me lie with my fathers. Carry me out of Egypt and bury me in their grave. He, Joseph, said, I will do as you say.
He asked him, he wants to be laid with his fathers. Where is his fathers buried? In Hebron, in the cave of Machpelah. Abraham and Sarah are buried there. Isaac and Rebekah are there. Jacob is there too. Jacob wants to be buried there too. And he told them, and Joseph told them, he asked him to swear to me. Joseph said, I'll do as you say. The promise is not good enough. Jacob says, go ahead.
Me? He, Yaakov, said, swear to me, and he swore to him. Yisrael prostrated himself at the head of the bed. After these...
Now, right here, he told them, it's not enough that you promise me. I want a note. Why he should swear to him? Because he knew that to do it will be a very hard thing. It's a slap in the face of the Egyptian. You came here when you were in trouble. We welcomed you. When there was was a famine in Canaan, you came to Egypt. We welcomed you. We gave you the best sobeb. Goshen was Pepper Pike or Solon. Now Solon is number one in raising children. You know that?
Is that right?
That's what they said,
Okay.
and business, whatever. One of the newspapers made they rated number one of raising children. Then
Yeah. Now Goshen was Goshen belonged to the Jews, didn't it? From Sarah.
Goshen belonged to the Jews.
Yeah, I mean when Sarah and Abraham came, and Pharaoh almost married Sarah. It was in the marriage contract that she would get Goshen. Is that not correct?
Could be it's written in the Medrash. I never heard it. You read it?
Yeah, I'll find it.
Yeah, I believe you. I mean, let's see where it could be hidden, such a story.
Sorry to deflect you.
No, I mean,
Because it's when, what was it, Abimelech, is that was his name?
no, it's Pharaoh.
Pharaoh, that's right, Abimelech, somebody else.
Abimelech is later.
Yeah.
The story is right here on page 122. And he took her as a wife, and later because he upset at him, he gave him a lot of gifts. And Rashi says that he gave him a lot of gifts because as a way of paying off, so to speak, because he was upset with him. But that he gave him Goshen?
That's what I remember, but
Could
I
be.
will, yeah, Abimelech is mentioned there. Okay.
It's not. It's on page 1. It's Pharaoh.
Yeah, no, I know that, but Abimelech is mentioned. Okay, I will.
It's written that he left from Egypt. He was very rich, but and later it's written that he became rich from this story. That's how he got the money.
Mm-hmm.
Rashi says it somewhere further.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember where the Rashi is, but Rashi says it later that he became rich because of this. That's actually the text is saying it, but Rashi points it out. But I never heard about Goshen, but could be. In any case, after 17 years of living in Egypt, he's dying. Egypt is not good enough for you. It was only good enough to utilize it. But to be buried there, you're not such a patriot. You don't want to be buried there. That would be, and he knew that would be very hard for Joseph, as the ruler of Egypt, to come to Pharaoh and tell him, I want you to take them. And actually, only because he swore to him, that gave him, when you give an oath, it gives you the strength to do it no matter what. And that gave him the strength to do it. To go to Pharaoh and to insist on going to Israel and to bury his father. That's why Jacob knew that it's going to be a hard job. And Jacob said the same order a few times after he gave the blessing to all the children.
Mm-hmm.
By the end, almost, I mean, not end, but end of Jacob's, page 564, he tells them number 29.
That's a long Parsha.
Yeah, it is kind of. Long Rashi, it's not so much a long Parsha.
54,
564.
60.
Mm-hmm.
You want to read? Number 29.
He commanded them and said to them, I shall be gathered to my people. Bring me for burial to my fathers to the cave that is in the field of Ephron the Shittite, in the cave that is in the field of Machpelah, which faces Mamre in the land of Canaan, which Abraham bought along with the field from Ephron the Hittite for a possession as a burial place. There they buried Sarah, Abraham, and Sarah his wife. There they buried Yitzhak and Rivka his wife. And there I buried Leah. Sure.
He goes on with great details to describe exactly where he wants to be buried. Nobody should make any mistakes. And my father's gravesite, to Joseph, he speaks in short. When he speaks to the rest of the family, he's in great detail. And then you turn to the next page, 566. It's written there how Joseph, when the days of weeping were over, number 4.
When the days of weeping were over, Joseph spoke to the house of Pharaoh, saying, If I have found favor in your eyes, please speak in Pharaoh's ears, saying, My father made me swear an oath, saying, Behold, I am dying.
You see, my father made me swear an oath. That was the power that he came. He says, I made an oath. I cannot go back on the oath. If he wouldn't have done it, he said, your father asked you. No, fine, your father asked you. Many people ask many things. Doesn't mean you have to do it. Go ahead.
My father made me swear an oath, saying, Behold, I am dying. In my grave that I have prepared for myself in the land of Canaan, there you shall bury me. Now therefore, please, I would go up and bury my father, and then I will return. Pharaoh said, Go up and bury your father, just as he made you swear.
Just as he made you swear. Just because he made you swear. That Jacob knew exactly with what he's dealing with, because it was a very hard thing. You know, in many countries, the idea that Jewish people want to be buried in Israel, people feel like an insult. There is a story about some famous Rothschild that was in France who wanted to be buried in Israel. And one of the great diplomats in France told them, I don't understand you Jews. You are loyal people. You pay taxes. You fight for the country. But something in the end of the day, you run away. If this is your country, if you're a Frenchie, you're Frenchie. Stay here. Where are you going? Then this was always a sore point. And here, that's why Jacob was so important to Jacob that he made him to swear. And that's why he said it to him, and then he sent it to everybody. 529. We'll go back to the regular story.
Was it customary in those days to embalm even Jews?
I don't think they had a choice. But obviously, Jacob was embalmed. Because he needed to go on a long journey. Then maybe that was embalmed. And also you need to understand what was embalmed at that time, what's embalmed today is two separate things. It doesn't necessarily mean that that time they did it against Jewish law. I don't know what was the style of embalming at that time. What Rashi says embalmed is like he made them, he put some good smells around them.
Yeah, on page 566.
Right? 566, it says there,
Aromatic spices, yeah.
you see? But it's not necessarily taking out the blood or things like this. You understand what's going on today?
Oh, okay.
It's a different embalming. Go ahead.
I'm curious why the location of burial really is so important. Even now, I mean, there are Jewish people that do not want to be buried where there are non-Jewish people, and maybe even the location in a cemetery could be important. I don't know about that.
Yeah.
And even I've heard there are customs about men and women, like if the woman's was married to someone else, she shouldn't be by someone else. There seems to be more to it, but I don't understand.
Obviously, in Judaism, a person after he dies is still alive. You see, when somebody lays in the hospital in a coma, is he dead? Not because he cannot move, he's dead, right? He's still alive. Because we have machines, we know that his heart is beating and that this is this. So because his heart stopped beating, is he dead? Actually, when talking about this, look when Jacob died, we'll see something very interesting, how the Torah describes it. We'll go back to 566 for some strange reason. We are going back there all the time. 564. 564, number 29. I'm sorry, 565. The line that we didn't read,
Yeah.
number 33.
Yeah, Yaakov concluded his commands to his sons, and he gathered up his feet to the bed. He expired and was gathered to his people.
The word death is not written. He
But that-
expired. Now look what Rashi says in the bottom, the last Rashi. He expired and was gathered to his people. The last Rashi on this page.
Oh, that's Rashi. He expired and was gathered. But death is not mentioned concerning Yaakov, which led our sages to state our father Yaakov did not die.
Our father Yaakov did not die.
But doesn't it say that with regards to all the patriarchs, he was gathered to his people?
Not by always say this language, not exactly. By some of them says that they died.
Okay.
Here, the word death is not written.
Okay.
And it's a lesson, whenever, in every time the Torah teaches us a different lesson. What means Jacob didn't die? Yeah, I know. But it doesn't mean, but it's a part of it is by every one of us. Now, what does this mean a person doesn't die? He is dead. We say Kaddish, we make a funeral, put him in a what means he's not died? the lowest level of the soul and the highest level of the soul remains with the body. Basically, there is somebody there. That's why there is a custom before burial, we ask for forgiveness from the dead. We stand by his coffin and we say, if I ever insulted you or hurt you, please forgive me. And even the Chevre Kadisha, the burial society who prepares the body, they will, after they finish, they will say, if we didn't treat you in the proper way, please forgive us. They treat them, the people who prepare the body, treat them like a human, like a living person. You don't eat in front of them. In a cemetery, you're not allowed to daven. Why? Because the dead cannot do mitzvahs. That's by doing mitzvahs there, you're insulting them. I mean, davening like putting on tefillin, things like this, mitzvahs. We tuck the tzitzis inside our clothing. It shouldn't be uncovered because it insults the dead. They cannot wear tzitzis. No, the talis that we bury people with, we make it not kosher before we bury them. But what I mean to say is, in Judaism, who your neighbor is in the cemetery makes a difference. If you're around holy people, it's better. It sleeps better, in the language that the Torah, in the Judaism, it says when Moshiach will come, the dead, the sleeping in the dust will wake up. Not the dead, the sleeping in the dust will wake up. So they went to take a nap for 2,000 years, big deal. You can sleep for 8 hours, you can sleep for 2,000 years, shine. Doesn't make it less of a sleep because it's for 2,000 years. It's still a sleep. You start to argue with me that the body is decaying. Yeah, I know, but first of all, the bodies of tzaddikim don't decay. And from every person, it's a whole other story how there be resurrection of the dead. It's also because we believe in the resurrection of the dead. Right? It's in the prayers. It's not a story that I made up. In the prayer book that we say every day, 3 times a day, that the people of the Great Assembly wrote together, the second blessing of the Amidah is about the resurrection of the dead. Then it makes a difference to be buried in a Jewish cemetery, and it makes a difference around who you buried. For example, with the Rebbe in New York, if you want to be buried very close, you'll have to be very rich. Very, very rich. And if you're not so rich, you'll be buried, but not so close. It's also good, but not so close. It's all about the question that it's a... And that's why Abraham bought... From where all those burial business goes. Abraham didn't want... They insisted... But the people of hate told them, bury Sarah among us, right? What was the argument? We'll go to Chayesod.
It's around page 240,
242.
Yeah.
Very good. Jacob, Avram, 242, read the text.
Abraham rose from the presence of his dead and spoke to the sons of Heth, saying, I am a foreigner and a resident among you. Grant me the possession of a gravesite with you, so that I may bury my dead from my presence. The sons of Heth replied to Abraham, saying to him, Hear us, my master. You are a prince of God in our midst. Bury your dead in the choicest of our gravesites.
Go, come here to our cemeteries. We are welcome. We'll give you the best, whatever you want. We have a big cemetery in Solon or in this, and you can come and bury wherever you want. Abraham didn't want to. Abraham insisted of buying his own place. Pay the first time that the first place in the Bible that a Jew, the only place that Abraham bought in Israel is a gravesite. The cave of Machpelah. Later, Jacob bought also a piece of land. When he came, he bought a piece of land in Shechem, belonged to Jacob. And King David bought the Temple Mount. 3 spots were purchased by the forefathers, by Abraham and Jacob, and as well by King David. That's 3 places that we actually paid for. That's written in the Bible. But here, Abraham insisted on being buried and burying his wife in a separate place. And later, I think when Abraham died, is it written something about it?
I just passed Abraham's death. I've got it. It's 268.
Yeah, but it's not. Yeah, it's written on page 268 exactly, number 9. The Torah makes a point to write it. His sons Yitzchak and Ishmael buried them, number 9. Then page 269 in top, in the Machpelah cave. And the Torah continues, in the field of Ephron, son of Zohar the Hittite. And the Torah continues. This was the field that Abraham purchased from the children of Heth, and there where Sarah was buried. Obviously, there is something about it. And that's why Jewish people, many Jews, not all, but many Jews throughout history wanted to be buried in Israel. The Chabad rabbis were not buried in Israel. We will get a look. We can see here, Jacob insisted of being buried in the cave of Machpelah. And by the way, Jacob wanted to, he said that belongs to him, the spot. When Jacob had to be buried, Esau showed up. He said, it's my spot. I'm the oldest one. The whole story. But the bottom line, Jacob wanted this spot because Jacob said he bought the birthright. That if he's the oldest, he should get it. Jacob got it in there. But obviously there is a very clear thing about it, to be buried, and for sure Jewish people Jewish people should be buried with Jewish people, and it's a whole different, because it's a different way of doing things. Joseph, on the other hand, the last line in the Torah, in this week's Parsha, who ends the book of Genesis, speaks about Joseph's death. On page 573. What is Joseph telling them? Number 24.
Joseph said to his brothers, I will die, and Elohim will certainly consider you and bring you up out of this land to the land which I swore to Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov.
Continue.
Joseph made the sons of Israel swear, saying, Elohim will certainly consider you, and you shall bring my bones up from there.
Continue.
Joseph died being 110 years old. They embalmed him, and he was placed in a coffin in Egypt.
The whole book of Genesis ends with this thing, that he was put in a coffin in Egypt. He only asked to be taken to Israel when the Jews will leave. Don't leave without me. When you leave, take me with you. But as long as you're here, I'm comfortable to be here. Joseph was looking at it in a different way. Joseph says, if the Jews live in Egypt, how can I leave them alone, run away, be